there is something I need to get off my chest, and it is Doctor Who. Doctor Who finished this weekend on Saturday at, I think, 6:50. The finale aired, and I didn't have the chance to watch it initially. I had to wait until after this stream finished before I had a chance to put it on and see what it was all about. Luckily, I made the smart decision, frankly, to have 2 cocktails before watching it, and that made it far more enjoyable than it should have been. I don't think it was really any surprise that the finale wasn't particularly good. I think there were some surprises in store for certain characters leaving far earlier than was previously anticipated, as well as the return of some actors who we didn't necessarily expect to see, but I figured I would take a little bit of time at the beginning of stream to talk about it. If you are new, hello, welcome. Please don't take my word as just being a troll on the new series. As you can see by my rather lovely backdrop, I am a Doctor Who fan. I really do care about the show, to the point where most of my identity has been modelled on the character of the Doctor. I don't know if it comes across, hopefully it doesn't. I was hoping to plagiarise in secret. But no, the show means a lot to me, and it has done since I was a kid, and I suppose it's with that reflection that it is quite heartbreaking to see where the show has ended up. The show has improved. The show has improved since the Chibnall era, but it's not by much, especially given the writing credits that were attached to the season. I think it's worth remembering that Russell T Davies was the person who saved Doctor Who from the wilderness years. He brought it back, and he made it work. Him, Christopher Eccleston, Billy Piper, they did a fantastic job at turning the show into something that has become a core memory for myself, and I'm sure many others. It was our jumping on point to the show. They were the ones who left a mark on me as a child. Left an impact. Sorry, left a mark sounds kind of dodgy. We're going to gloss over that. But that was due to Russell T Davies' writing, and I think he did a phenomenal job at making a show that was very socially aware back in 2005, and was able to communicate a lot of ideas with a essence of maturity that I really liked. Then 2023 comes around, we have these specials for the 60th anniversary, and there's something missing, right? I've done videos on the main channel where I've talked a little bit about what it was that was missing. There seemed to be an element of, I don't want to say playing politics, because Doctor Who is a political show. It was more that the way politics had been implemented felt a little off from before. In the 60th specials, it's worth saying that for the most part it did feel natural. It felt like they had done a fairly good job, especially with characters like Rose, of implementing that story. Although I will say the implementation gets slightly more odd in later seasons, with Rose kind of just hanging out at UNIT even though she's 14 years old, which people seem to keep forgetting for some reason, but hey, that's fine. We can kind of look past that element-ish. For the most part, it kind of seemed to work, but it wasn't a great start. Doctor Who wasn't back with a roaring fire in the way I think many people hoped it would be, especially for the beginning of what was supposed to be a new era with Disney funding the show. So we've just had 2 seasons of Russell T Davies' new show, Disney Who, if you will. I think that's what we're going to call it on the Clip channel. By the way, there's a Clip channel. Hopefully you're watching this on the Clip channel, in which case, hello, my head is wobbling a lot. I'm sorry about that. But I thought we'd go over briefly some of the things that I noticed about the show. And I apologise that there isn't any music. I might put something in post. For a show that has been a tool for very good political messaging in the past, something was missing here. Something didn't feel right. It didn't feel natural. And realistically, it should, because it has worked very well. Examples, I think I mentioned before on a stream with Alan Wake, but we got Aliens of London, where it's a very firm parody of the Labour government during the Iraq War, weapons of mass destruction above our heads that can be activated on short notice, which is a direct callback to something that Tony Blair said during that time period. And that's important to notice because it is a very competent story in its own right. You can watch Aliens of London and World War III, and they work. They work on their own without needing any additional context, right? And if you were like me, you were a kid growing up in that period, you were none the wiser, right? You didn't know who Tony Blair was particularly, but it was an enjoyable episode. You've got other examples later on with Peter Capaldi, a great example, two actually that come to mind. Zygon Inversion, that two-parter, where you've got one of the best speeches in all of Doctor Who. They're commenting on the immigration crisis and the idea of weaponizing people's fear. And it's kind of made all the more despicable that this is being done by the Zygon's own group of people, their own race, right? They're weaponizing themselves to alienate people further, to alienate other Zygons. And that's clever political commentary, because that is exactly how terrorism works. That is exactly the methods that certain groups will use. Another example in Series 10, Oxygen. That is a fantastic episode about capitalism and capitalistic intent. Again, with Peter Capaldi at the helm, absolutely fantastic. So we've got a long-running history of politics within Doctor Who. So what's not working here? I think for one, it's the way that the politics has been implemented. You've got elements like Space Babies where you can very obviously see the parallels to America. That's not the problem, but you've got a very overly simplistic plot that's been attached with essentially a couple of throwaway lines that highlight the context, all done in a very quick and unnatural manner. I think the same can be said for the Robot Revolution. In fact, I want to focus more on Season 2 because it's more fresh in my mind. We've got the character of Alan in the first episode of this Season 2 on the planet Miss Belinda Chandra. And Alan is a bit of a weird character. He's very clearly a misogynist. He's not a particularly nice or a character that you would want around at all. And he gets unimaginable power because of a slight slip up on Belinda's part when talking to the robots who come to take her. There's a comment in there about Planet of the Incels, about Alan specifically. And the problem is it doesn't work because it doesn't understand seemingly what an incel is. Could he be part of the red pill community? Absolutely. That didn't exist back when he was supposedly taken, but sure. There are a number of different terms that you could attribute to Alan, but incel really isn't one of them. And it's odd because you've got AI, both which get a mention with the device being mistakenly called the AI generator before it's found to be the Alan generator. And you've got a number of these issues which are seemingly on the writer's mind, and seemingly they're commenting to say these things are bad. And okay, understood, you're right, but there isn't anything deeper here. It isn't really enough to reference that these things are bad. You need to give us a constructive criticism as to why they're bad. Let's take Conrad later on. Conrad is a great example of this, because we have this far-right influencer, and he is meant to be all of them. He's meant to be every far-right influencer you've ever listened to in one. And if you want to take that criticism and you want to attribute it to a character, fine, okay, but you need to understand why these people say the things they do, because they aren't all the same, and to claim that they are is a woeful misunderstanding of the situation, and one that ends up looking like a caricature. Here's the trick. You don't want to create more people like Andrew Tate. You don't want to create more people like Tommy Robinson. But if people are in a situation where they're suffering, they are actively looking for things to help them or to understand why they're in the situation they're in, the last thing they want is something that looks like a parody on them. That doesn't work. Funny enough, they're not going to be particularly willing to give you a second chance to talk them through if they think that you think they're an idiot. If you are willing to make a caricature of them, then they think you don't respect them. Why are they going to waste their time watching something that they view to be something that dislikes them? When we're having these conversations, we need to make sure that we're actually trying to reach these people. We want to have that subtle commentary woven in, because it's the lessons of acceptance that are really important to just embed in there. Because if you can get people to agree with that, then it can be the case of, well, hold on a minute. I believe everything that was being said here, so how does that conflict with my values? If it does, why is it conflicting with my values? Something I've been watching recently that I think, ironically at the same time as Doctor Who, has given me a real new appreciation for this is Star Trek The Next Generation. Oh boy, I have held off on watching Star Trek for a long time, but I've started watching it. I'm into season 2 right now, and you know what? For the most part, it gets it absolutely right. There are topics that get covered in a really interesting way. Given it's the 80s, it's not perfect. There's definitely a gap in understanding from where we are now, but to see a society that is built on the idea of equality, equity, the idea that material possessions no longer define people, it is utopian in its outlook. And it's also a very generous view of humans and the idea that we've evolved past this petty nature, to the point where the 21st century in Star Trek is portrayed as being a nuclear war zone, a dark stain on human history. That is how we're viewed in Star Trek in our current history. The last episode of the first season is really interesting because it raises a number of interesting points around the world. We get 3 characters who get, essentially they've been frozen. They've been in like a cryo sleep, and they get unfrozen, and they're from the 20th century. You get to see how they are trying to cope. You got a person who maybe hasn't quite learnt that women are people too. You know, he's still going through that arc, it's fine. You've got a lady who simply wants to see her family again. And you've got a man who is desperate to find out what's happened to his stock options. And when Picard explains to him, look, we don't have a need for stocks anymore. We don't have a need for material possessions. The food is provided for everyone equally. No one is left starving anymore. It's something that he can't fathom. He asks, where's the challenge in that? And it's really interesting to see someone from that world essentially left almost homeless in a world of peace and tranquility. You can do hard-hitting commentary, you can do a look into the future for a capitalist and do it well. The interesting thing was, that person, that capitalistic figure, you may not like him, but you can understand why he takes the decisions he does. On that note, going back to Conrad, the thing that I neglected to mention is that until halfway through the episode, he is just a standard dude. All of his social media is normal. He has a podcast where he seems to just be a normal dude speculating on aliens, and then suddenly he turns into a far-right grifter at the midpoint of the episode for no discernible reason. That is not a character. That is a parody of a character, and one that doesn't even make sense within your own universe. Are you telling me that Ruby, who has access to UNIT, never did a background check on this person? And even if she didn't, how did he build up a social media presence where he's able to reach millions of people for a hoax on UNIT when he's previously built his whole identity around someone who's looked into aliens? It just doesn't seem to make sense. But no, I thought it was interesting because, again, it does highlight they don't seem to fully understand who Conrad is supposed to be mimicking. If you look at someone like Andrew Tate and you disagree with him, and hopefully that you do, there is a crisis at the moment, especially with young men. I think a show like Adolescence does a very good job of covering what that is. The problem with someone like Andrew Tate is not the same as the problem with someone like, for example, Ben Shapiro. In fact, if you look at Ben Shapiro and you look at what he's saying around Andrew Tate, he's saying that that is not a person that he wants to associate with, which is really interesting, right? They can both be put into the camp of being far-right grifters, right? Andrew Tate is very obvious. If you agree with Ben Shapiro, then I would say look at his opinion on George Floyd a couple of years ago, and then look at how it's changed now. The thing is, these two figures are both prime examples of a far-right figure, but they don't actually have much crossover with one another. Their beliefs are actually somewhat polarizing to one another. And that's an important thing to make note of. There is clearly separations in this ideology. Someone like Andrew Tate, I mean, the university he runs is literally called Hustlers University. There is a clear monetary drive that is far more at the forefront. Someone like Ben Shapiro, it's probably slightly different. The same with Praga University, right? They're not doing it for the money, they already have loads of money. They may be still using it as a lobbying force, but it's more about indoctrination, trying to change how the younger generation views things. My headphones are just turned off. That's really useful. I suppose the point I'm making is that there is nuance to these characters that needs to be understood. A program like Adolescence does a good job of understanding the mentality of someone who might be listening to Andrew Tate. Whereas Alan isn't so much meant to try and understand this perspective, isn't supposed to be warning people of what to look out for. It is making a character that's vaguely misogynistic and then saying, ha, that's like this. Reference humour. That's all it seems to be. You're referencing hot topic political issues and then you're expecting brownie points for tackling them, when you actually haven't gone into the nuance of how we can tackle them, or even put it in a story which is accommodating of that issue. You've got episodes like the Eurovision one, which I don't particularly want to cover that one again, but hey, I feel like we have to. The Eurovision episode kind of seems to want to have its cake and eat it too, because on one hand it seems to think, and let's face it, this is a very explicit parallel for the situation in Israel and Gaza, and obviously the genocide being committed in Gaza is wrong, right? I think we can all agree on that. Now, the controversy comes to the fact that companies within Israel are funding Eurovision, and so there is seen as being a conflict of interest there. Also, in addition to this, the other thing that was pointed out is that when Russia invaded Ukraine, Russia was excluded from Eurovision. At that point, you've made a decision based on politics to exclude a country in order to punish it for its political actions, right? Now, regardless of if you think that's right or wrong, you can't then change your opinion later down the line when a different country does the exact same thing. That's essentially what we have with Israel and Gaza and its links to Eurovision. Bringing it back to Doctor Who, you've got this episode which seems to want to desperately call out the fact that there are war crimes being committed in Gaza by the Israeli government, by Netanyahu, but it doesn't actually stand to it because it also wants to praise Eurovision. It's equally trying to praise Eurovision and have a conversation around the unfairness of Eurovision, and that doesn't work. You can't tackle both at once because that in itself is a conflict of interest. You had Chuti supposed to be being the UK voice for Eurovision up until, I think, on the day, or maybe the day before, where he pulled out. And again, that is a massive conflict of interest. Are you condemning Eurovision or are you praising it? Again, you've got the politics that you want to talk about directly clashing with the episodes that they're a part of, and it doesn't really feel like they've been properly integrated. Okay, so we covered that. Gonna briefly mention the other thing which I think has been a real problem of this era, the companion. I think, and I will stand by this, Belinda did not get any characterization with the exception of maybe some in The Well. A lot of what she says in her introductory episode could be considered snarky. It could also be considered actively antagonistic at points. I don't think that was their intention. I think we're supposed to like Belinda. I think that isn't a stretch for a new companion. But I think it is interesting how it comes across, because I think she's being used. It's her comment about Planet of the Incels, right? In the same way it's her comment about doctors standing around. And the jab may be at the doctor directly, but given the state of the NHS at the moment, I don't think it's a particularly good faith interpretation. Nurses do a fuck ton of work, right? And it is absolutely crucial, we recognise that, but it isn't at the detriment of doctors that they're doing that, right? We shouldn't be criticising doctors in order to praise nurses. Everyone's on the same side there. The other character I want to talk about is Ruby. Because I was desperately, if you watch my video where I cover the specials, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel, trying to find something to praise her with, and I kind of settled on the musical score because she's classed as a musician. But let me ask you, when do they actually utilise her ability other than in the second episode? Also, for a companion named Ruby, the fact that they didn't use the song Ruby by Kaiser Chiefs at any point? Absolute travesty. How could you? You got a British icon right there. Didn't even utilise them. Perfect opportunity, you had a musical episode as well. But no. I actually think that the best characterisation for Ruby, and I mean proper characterisation, isn't 73 yards. I think that she gets no characterisation in 73 yards actually. It is in Boom. She gets the most characterization in an episode where she gets shot and is asleep for half of it. The scene where the doctor is telling her to give him a counterweight, and the part where she needs a beat in order to be able to give it to him, something to keep essentially tempo with. I'm sorry, I'm not musically literate. I hope I'm not offending anyone with my poor music lingo. But that offers more personality than the rest of her scenes combined. That should not be the case. I think that she really shines in Boom, and it's a shame because she's only in it for half of it. She ends up getting shot and kind of dying, but not really. It's kind of weird. For at least half the screen time, ironically getting shot by Belinda as well. I think all this to say that I didn't feel the companions have been completely characterized, and this is made worse by the fact that, especially for Belinda, she spends half of her episodes not doing anything. She doesn't do anything for the story in the engine, she doesn't do anything for either of the finales. I suppose she arrives at the end for the Interstellar Song Contest one, so we'll give her that. The main contribution she has is in the well, and as I've already ranted about in a separate stream, that had its problems in of itself, but nothing to do with Belinda in particular. The problem is they don't get given anything to do. And again, I have to go back to Star Trek, because I feel Star Trek The Next Generation gave its characters something to do. Riker has something to do, Worf has something to do, Data gets a lot of time, so does Geordi. Each character not only gets time on screen, we get to see their distinct personalities at play while they're achieving certain tasks. We even get to see them having confrontations with one another, and the way that they go through dealing with it as Starfleet officers in a way which is both professional and also trying to accept and understand and compromise on their different approaches. You've got a whole class of characters in that show, a whole bunch of companions if you will, and each one of them not only are well characterized, but they have something to do. And that is really important. Obviously this kind of suffers with Doctor Who, given you've got 8 episodes currently, but come on, you've got to have her doing something for some of it. Please, come on! The last thing, absolute last thing, and then we'll get on to Elden Ring Night Rain, is actually the fan service. This is an interesting point, because when it was first announced that the show, well, that Ncuti Gatwa would be on the show, I think at the same time it was clear that the Daleks would not be making an appearance in the season. And honestly, that's fine. You can have that. The Daleks probably need to appear less. I think I said that in my video about Dalek vs. Resolution. But they are one of the most iconic enemies in Doctor Who. As are the Cybermen, as are now the Weeping Angels. As are the Ice Warriors, actually. You've got many of these creatures and a wealth of time to use them. And I guess I raise this point because who do we get? We get the Toymaker, who is one of the oldest villains, but not exactly memorable. We get Sutekh, who appeared once in an episode where the last episode is purely them just walking around corridors, and don't get me wrong, it's an interesting premise, but when Sutekh appeared on screen, and I was one of the few people who actually recognized the name, my reaction was, oh, okay, sure. You got the Rani, which it was spoiled ahead of time. That is a separate issue on itself, the spoilers for the show. But you've got the Rani, and she was in probably the worst era of the show, the 6th Doctor era and the start of the 7th Doctor era, which was admittedly shaky. She's not exactly remembered as a great character. And then you've got Omega, who starred in one good episode-ish, the first special of Doctor Who, then appeared in a dodgy 5th Doctor episode, and I have not cared about him since, and I doubt many people have. It's fan service, sure. You're servicing the fans in the most, I suppose, bland way possible. And in the case of Sutekh and Omega, what do you get when they actually arrive? Oh, well, in Sutekh you get a unrecognizable dog, which personally I thought was cool, but loses all of the traditional design elements that were present in Pyramids of Mars. And in the case of Omega, he is a giant zombie mutant baby thing that eats other Time Lords now, and is so far from what he was that you may as well not have included him. And actually, you really shouldn't have included him because the plot wrapped up halfway through the episode, and that was kind of embarrassing, wasn't it? So you've got the fan service there, but it's all classic Who references which you haven't introduced properly, so people won't get it. You didn't give them a introduction like The Master, where you had a series of payoffs all leading up to that. You've just kind of dropped them in at the deep end and expect people to know who that is, and my question is, why? why would people know who these characters are? A lot of the people you're trying to pander to are new fans, and the first thing you showed them was space babies. If they managed to survive that episode and the episode following, these big reveals don't mean anything. And why would they? I'm in this really weird spot, because I genuinely want the show to do well, as a lifelong fan, but at the same time, there aren't any new ideas, or at least they're not good ideas. You've also introduced the concept of magic, you've introduced the concept of wishes, which, blimey, that went well. And my issue with stuff like that is you diminish the stakes. Because why would I care when a magic door can literally appear out of nowhere and save the day? And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, please remember that that is exactly how they solve the first major roadblock in the finale, is a magic door appears and saves the Doctor. The problem is, you've got different types of magic systems. You've got the type that you see in something like Mistborn, where it's a hard magic system, and you've got something like Lord of the Rings, which is soft, right? But the problem is, in Doctor Who, it's not symbolic, and it isn't a magic system that has any rules, which means that there are no stakes, because anything can happen at any given time. So if anything can happen at any given time, why would anyone care about what happens? Because the answer is, something inexplicable will happen at the last moment, we won't have been able to see coming, and it won't make any sense. So those are my issues with the show as it is currently. Will Doctor Who survive this? I don't know. It's planned to go on hiatus. Billy Piper is set to return. Ncuti is leaving the show, and it's unclear why. Some people have theorised because he wasn't being given enough to do, and honestly, it's understandable. I don't blame Ncuti. The other thing though I wanted to mention very briefly, we will get on, that thing about cameos again, that thing about references. The Well references Midnight, which is one of the iconic things about Doctor Who in recent memory, but it also really goes out of its way to reference both the Fugitive Doctor and literally having a cameo from the 13th Doctor in the last episode. To which I say, why? These elements aren't the things that people want to remember. I feel really bad for the lady who plays the Fugitive Doctor in particular, because I know she's a lifelong fan of the show, and I really want to see her do well. I want, hopefully, the show to utilise her in a different role, or even better, just recast her as a future Doctor. I'd be perfectly okay with that. Do away with the Timeless Child storyline, recast her, because she's great. She is more like the Doctor than Jodie Whittaker was. And that's the problem. You bring back Jodie Whittaker for that finale, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for her to be there, other than to annoy people who really didn't like her era. And I don't know why. I really don't get it. You could have had Susan, because that was the character that was being teased for the last 2-3 episodes. Could have had her make an appearance, because blimey, that would have made more sense. Could have even had David Tennant, because he's the person that Ncuti bi-generated from. And in that particular scenario, maybe that was the reason or the point of their merger, who knows? It complicates things, doesn't it? And it just doesn't feel particularly natural, and it treats everyone who has a disagreement with the current direction as someone who is actively hostile to it, or someone who is a right-wing grifter. And don't get me wrong, those people absolutely exist. I wish they didn't. I wish there weren't people who were just being completely transphobic every time they talk about Doctor Who, because that's just being hateful, and there isn't really a place in this fandom for that. But that doesn't mean there isn't genuine, legitimate criticism out there. And right now, with the show on hiatus after doing really poorly, I really hope that people choose to listen to one of those voices out there who hopefully could have genuine good ideas for the show. You know, maybe a couple fans have thought of something for a while, you know, not hinting at anything, but like, hey, if I've been doing it, if I've been thinking up ways of retconning the Timeless Child, my headphones are turned off again, then I'm sure other people have as well. And I'm sure there are a bunch of people, bunch of starry-eyed, bright new writers that you could get who would be really interested in that opportunity. Really hope Doctor Who does well. Really wish the best for the show, but also, if you're not going to change anything, then what's the point? Because this level of quality, people are just going to stop watching, as they did during the Jodie Whittaker era. That is going to be the cycle of things, and it will only repeat. Doctor Who is not a loop, it's a spiral, and it's spiraling downwards at the moment, but it doesn't have to be. It is a show about regeneration, so let the show regenerate, let it evolve, and let's see what we can make of it. let's return to that hard-hitting commentary in interesting sci-fi worlds, in interesting sci-fi concepts, like A Wheel in Time from Stephen Moffat, hell, Blink by Stephen Moffat, like Heaven Sent by Stephen Moffat. I'm sensing a theme here. Throwing in a couple of Russell T Davies scripts, Turn Left, brilliant, hard-hitting political commentary about the state of the world, about how we treat immigrants, about how we treat people who are homeless, all condensed into 45 minutes. You can do it. You can do it. I believe in you, Russell. We can return to that dark, gritty 2005 vibes again, with the added understanding that we've gained in the years since, of course, but hey. Hopefully, if you're watching this and you're a Doctor Who fan, please don't take it as me just trying to shit on the show. That's not what I want to do. I genuinely want to praise it. I criticise because it can be better, and I want it to be better. I hope that comes across. But anyway, I did say that this was an Elden Ring Night Rain stream, and I meant it. So I think it's about time that we go on and play some. Was that an hour-long rant? Absolutely. Will people watch it? Probably not. Also remember, not scripted. Probably should have been. And maybe I will on the main channel. But this is all off the cuff, so please don't judge me too harshly if I have misspoken at points, because it was not intentional. I promise. Oh shit, I turned off my headphones, didn't I? Or no, I didn't turn them off. They turned off due to inactivity. I should have put backing music or something. But hey, long rant about Doctor Who over. Elden Ring Night Rain time.